We are live.
All right. Welcome to Southern Oregon Progressive Populist Podcast. It's kind of the idea is really the progressive populism, and the word populist not being hijacked from one aspect or another. So, my name is Betsy Cunningham, and I am the co-founder of Progressive Oregon Podcast with Kevin Bell, who is not here, but was helpful in motivating getting this going. And the idea is to just talk about issues that are relevant to Douglas County and beyond, primarily Southwestern Oregon, because we have a lot of the same politics. But I could not resist asking the folks that are our guests tonight from Lincoln County to come and share their experiences in the county commission. So, Zach, you want to introduce yourself, and then John, you can introduce our guest.
Sure thing. Hi, I'm Zach. I'm an historian. I'm a PhD student at the University of Oregon, born and raised in good old Roseburg. I'm also affiliated with the Institute for Social Ecology out in Vermont. Always happy to be here. John?
Okay, yeah, I'm John Hunter. I'm president of Community Rights Douglas County, and I'm on the board of the Oregon Community Rights Network, and that's sort of how I learned about this, what we're going to talk about tonight. So, and it's because one of our members is Barbara Davis, who's on here tonight, and so I want to introduce her. She's also with the Lincoln County Community Rights, and the Lincoln County Commissioner, who's willing to join us on short notice, Casey Miller. And I don't think that we would ever expect a Douglas County Commissioner to be on this show. So we are very honored to have Casey tonight. So who's ever next?
Go, Casey.
Yeah, pardon me there. Yes, I am Casey Miller, Lincoln County Commissioner. I was a public information officer for 14 years before I ran for office in the Lincoln County Commissioner's office. And I have some history in the early formation of Lincoln County community rights. Learned a lot in that time when that group was forming. Interestingly enough, looking ahead, when I took office in January of 2023, Commissioner Jacobson immediately sort of handed off to me my representation or our board's representation on the Forest Trust Lands Advisory Committee, also the O&C Lands Committee, which is where I rub elbows with your Douglas County commissioners.
I'm sorry.
So I can speak to that. And, recently I've been attending some of our small woodlands community committee meetings. So, I'm more and more wrapping my head around forestry issues. But yes, I'm a county commissioner. I am in essentially my third term. And happy to be here today. I want to be optimistic, but perhaps I do have some cautionary tales for those that are interested in wanting to be elected officials. And pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm Barbara Davis. I am one of two chief petitioners of Lincoln County Community Rights. We are the people that got together and put an aerial spray ban on the ballot in 2017 in Lincoln County. Amazingly, to our surprise, it passed. And despite the opposition, a tremendous opposition, and it lasted for 29 months, over which it was overturned September 2019 on state preemption of anything to do with pesticides. But I became interested in attending Board of Commissioner meetings Earlier this year, when I, thanks to our local online journal, found out that there was a lot of, what can I say, dissension going on at the county commissioner's office, and been attending meetings, and what an eye opener it's been. So I hope that Casey, you will speak to a little bit of that. Thank you.
So Casey, please just tell us anything that you think that you tell us your story of what happened. And I start probably from 2024, September 2024 is some information I read, and I read a few other, pieces in between. So is there a happy ending to that story?
Well, I think I'm still working through it. Well, thank you. I will kind of start from the beginning in regard to my challenges with what I would say is having equity on our county commission. Now, we have three county commissioners, and on September 18th, I brought in written reports into a category we have on our agenda called Commissioners' Reports. So I read from my written Commissioners' Report, and the following day I was notified that complaints had been made against me for bullying and harassment, and that I should work remotely. So I was proactive, and I left the office and began working from home, and have been working from home ever since. What eventually unfolded was an investigation by an external law firm. And in mid-January, the law firm released its findings and determined that I did not bully or harass. But I've been trying to work my way back into the office that I sat in for, 15 plus years since that time. And so, I'm continuing to be proactive and participate in the process that has been presented to me. But over the last year, since September, what I would say is, what I've reached out to other county commissioners, I've looked at other governance models to really wrap my head around the conundrum I'm having with presenting memos, requests, that the governing body deliberate on topics, and that those requests never manifest in the county commissioner meeting themselves. Now, so you would say to yourself, well, that sounds kind of odd. How is that possible? And I would say, it is. I've had upwards of 30 plus requests on topics of all kinds of subjects. For example, I'm working on one right now. It's a memo to bring and request that the county commissioners discuss roadside spraying. So we've had a number of constituents reaching out to us. Barbara Davis constitutes one group. We've actually got a separate group. I was reviewing all of that today. And the essential concern is that the Public Works Department had a long history of excluding certain properties from roadside spray. Okay, we've got a new Public Works Director. He started spraying properties that traditionally were exempt from those activities. Okay, so what is my idea? Let's take all that constituent input. Let's bring in our Public Works Director. Let's all come together in a Board of Commissioners meeting and review what the constituents' concerns are, review what's going on with our Public Works Department, and have a discussion. So now I will be making that specific request to our board, but that type of example of previous requests I've made just don't come into the public meeting context. So, I think for me, it's tremendously frustrating. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to others, because you have this expectation as a constituent that you reach out to your elected official. Hopefully they can bring to the governing body any issue, whatever it might be. Maybe you're relegated to coming in and providing public input, for example, to voice your concerns. But either way, what we're really seeing is a real constriction in our board around the public's ability, and in my case, a commissioner, other elected officials like our district attorney are not able to bring items for the board to discuss. And in terms of like optics, for example, we have a district attorney who's literally having to come in during 3 minutes of constituent input to be heard. And it's just like, whoa, this is off the rails, right? Like we need better iterative processes like we see in other jurisdictions that at least allow some pre-deliberation before potentially things get to final decision making or discussion. And so that's kind of the atrophy and the constriction that we have right now. And I'm happy to expand upon it, but I would say that's just one of the challenges that we're facing in Lincoln County.
So is there not a process to get stuff on the agenda?
No,
Is that what
no.
you're saying?
Yeah, essentially there are no board rules. In the absence of any kind of constructs that ensure equity, we're just not having it.
Hey, I had a question. Just kind of based upon the article I read that Barbara sent me. You guys are not a home rule county,
Right.
but you have a county administrator.
Well, actually, our county administrator resigned. In 2021, we made an ordinance that created the first official county administrator. Historically, we had an individual that was, I would say, kind of a hybrid administrator. He was our lead legal counsel. He performed the duties of a county administrator. But in 2021, we codified that, right? We created rules around that. But in about 10 months later, we hired our first administrator. That person resigned around January. And then we kind of went through, I guess others might define that the board appointed our chair as the interim administrator. I could, argue some of the legal language and that was convoluted. But just most recently at our last Board of Commissioners meeting, we had our third iteration of the order or the legal language that defines our chair as administrator. Now, interestingly enough, I just recently received an email from staff that a few hours after the meeting on Wednesday, our chair, Claire Hall, immediately delegated her authority as chair administrator to our HR director. And I haven't received that formally in any shape or form other than that was, emailed to me by a department head. So I would say what I know right now is our chair, who, and I opposed the order when we voted on it, but our chair/administrator has already delegated her role as administrator to our HR director.
So you don't have an administrator right now.
Well, yeah, we certainly don't have an official, independent administrator.
So who is making the decisions when you had an administrator?
Oh, when we had an administrator?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we had an administrator for a while, and the administrator is delegated the authorities that they have. I mean, they have a job description, right? So if,
Right.
say, for example, if you look at Lane County, which has an administrator, many of the authorities and responsibilities that a commissioner has are delegated to that administrator. But you have to
Right.
look at each jurisdiction's rules to see the granular details of what they're responsible for.
Okay.
So just for clarification, you have three commissioners
Yeah, we're a
and
three board.
Okay, that's like Douglas County. And so part of your conundrum, which we have here, is the Oregon Public Meetings and Records Law, or the Public Meetings Law, says deliberation and decision must be made in public view. And so what we found, and I actually got involved in county politics some years ago, is I discovered, because I was looking into the appointment process for a particular position, and then they had little memos that they called routing slips, and
Mm,
so they would pass them, the contenders for a commission seat, and
mm,
say, check off, I like this one. Well, I caught that and said, hey, this is a deliberation. So they quit doing that. I mean, there wasn't a
mm.
whole lot of hassle once I talked to the county council and said, and it's oh, we've been doing this forever. And it's like, you've been doing it wrong forever.
Uh,
But it doesn't sound like your fix is as easy, and is your inability to get stuff on the agenda related to the conflict on the board? Because I haven't ever heard that raised as an issue in Douglas County commissioners, but they all seem to be pretty much in lockstep,
mm,
in policy
yeah.
with each other.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Well, I think, and forgive me, I would have dived into Douglas County's model and seen what I could find online, if anything. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point, right? When they're sort of lockstep, maybe you don't see any kind of issues, right? I think, but that's the challenge, right? I think historically we've not had clear rules, right? Now, historically, again, back prior to our first administrator, I remember as a staffer, I was the PIO, but if we had an executive assistant that would, quit, and I would pitch and serve in that position. So, I've had many chunks of time where I literally created the agenda. And for years, every Thursday I would propose that draft agenda to our legal counsel. They'd take a look at it and say, yeah, okay. Um, when our first administrator started, we would actually meet every Friday. Me at the time as the temporary administrative assistant, the chair, and the administrator, right? And we would all look at that agenda. Now, in Lincoln County, on Mondays, we would, prior to each Wednesday's commissioner meeting, we would have a staff meeting, and all commissioners would attend that meeting. There's a long story about that meeting. I was uncomfortable with that, and I won't get into that. But we would, at the end of our staff meeting, we would take a look at the agenda and say, is everything there that we need? Our support staff, that need to show up, going to be present for the Wednesday meeting to go over, the items, and that was a pretty good process. We would be very careful not to really deliberate on things. However, it was a public meeting. However, after the September 18th meeting, which we discussed, our staff meeting disappeared, and that's never happened again. So, that took away an intermediary piece where at least we could vet to a certain degree, the meeting itself and the content of the meeting. But reflecting on Douglas, yeah, the question really is what's administrative, right? And how are those administrative decisions getting made? The devil's sort of in the details. And if you look back over the last several years, Oregon Government Ethics Commission took an over jurisdiction of public records and meeting laws. And since then, we've seen sign of a kind of an iterative process to really analyze, well, what constitutes a serial meeting? And we know some of those highlights are that however, deliberation might happen. Say it's one person stops into an elected official's office and then jumps into the next one and jumps into the next one. And maybe, say staff is informing each commissioner. However, if they're cueing any kind of decisive conversation and passing that on to the next person, That's where we get into this area of the serial meeting. Now, this could also be happening through a digital means. It could be happen through emails, for example, right? Looking for decisions. It could happen in potentially digital workflows. So we're under investigation right now by the Oregon Government Ethics Commission that our administrative workflows that essentially poll the commissioners for decisions, that itself could constitute a serial meeting. So you really have to peel back the onion on all the administrative processes, see how they're happening. And what I would say is what's best to do is lean into the public meeting process. Any type of process that requires sequential or decisions by the commission, the governing body, needs to be happening where the public can see it and observe it. And I think what's happening right now, since the Ethics Commission took jurisdiction of those public records and meetings laws, we're seeing probably what has been historically kind of questionable processes that need revision. And I think we'll continue to see iterations, and hopefully the outcome is that more of these decisions that maybe were loosey-goosey administrative decisions be brought into the public meeting so we can all see what's going on and be aware of them.
Yeah, Lori, you want to ask a question or make a
Yes,
comment?
I do. Thank you, Betsy. Hi, everybody. My name is Lori Wick, and I am a candidate for Douglas County Commissioners. And I had a question about the putting something on the agenda and that process. And first, for how do you guys do it? And then how it was explained to me here that I had a quick meeting with one of the commissioners, and they related that you meet with one of them, and then that they would put it on like the routing slip that Betsy was mentioning, and that they pass it around and they decide if they want to add it to the agenda or not. Does that sound appropriate?
That sounds a little iffy. Let me just tell you about our process, right? What we would do historically before we have the last version of the software, which I actually worked on to request as the public information officer. But what we would do is we have a central administrative assistant and say, the Health and Human Services Director, the Public Works Director, they'd email that administrative assistant their requests, right, for what say a contract that the board needs to sign. That central person, gets all of these requests and then produces that draft agenda. Now, when we got the new software, department heads were given logins to the software, and essentially all those requests come in and that composes the agenda. Now, one of the things that's important to remember is, not everything is necessarily, say, deliberated, right? So if you look at the Lincoln County Commission, I think last year the commissioners signed upwards of 350 documents. And not everything is necessarily deliberated on. It could be an IGA, an intergovernmental agreement. When you look at the consent calendar, you see items that we say have previously come before the board before, or routine, right? Like, yeah, I mean, some of these things have happened over time, et cetera, right? So, but again, Lori, I would say what you want to look at is when you're talking about those routing slips, I think when we get into issues that really kind of need everybody to, chew on them and review them, and then also ensure that the public can have feedback, I think you really need to look into that and say to yourself, well, wait a second, is there something going on potentially behind the scenes where could they potentially avoid certain things because maybe they don't want the optics of it to be analyzed? And I would say the important thing to do, especially looking forward, is, hey, wait a second, let's make some sort of, intermediary process that ensures, things can't be kind of pushed to the side or, done kind of informally when really the public should know, right? Like if
Yeah.
things are withheld or somehow shielded, that's just not good. I think the whole idea with the commission and the items that the commission makes decisions on, we need to ensure that, we can all see them in unison. The way I like to explain it is when that draft agenda goes out to the community, okay, say maybe it's just a patchwork of what it could be, but at some point, an agenda is made, a packet is made. You as a citizen, as well as the commission, should simultaneously look at all that information. And then when it comes to that meeting, you're equipped to ask the questions and answers, just like the commission would be looking at things and asking and questions and answers. I think we all need to move together, be all seeing it at the same time. Then when we land in that meeting, we can all, dive into it together, right? And I think that's kind of the key thing. And if you've seen one county, you've seen one county. But I think you really need to peel back the onion on the process and then ensure that every step of the way that you're able to be included.
Okay. And then another question. I don't know how long ago, but it was a while ago. I'm pretty sure our commissioners removed a public discussion from our agenda. And so they'll have the opportunity for the public to speak to the agenda item before it's presented by the person.
Okay.
But at the end, there's no room just to speak to any issues.
Hmm.
Is there
Yeah.
something that we can do about that as the public?
You know what? I mean, I think, again, like looking at different counties, for example, like looking at Tillamook, they'll have a preloaded management team meeting, right? Where they're working on um, uh, with staff before it comes to the board. So I think what you want to do is say, well, wait a second, let's just make sure that there are no quantum leaps, if you will, between when something is presented and then when it comes up for deliberation, that there's an intermediary step that gives you the opportunity to dive into it with your elected officials. Lori, we can circle back together. I'd be happy to look at Douglas County's model and, really peel back the onion on it with you if you'd like.
I would like that. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to
I'm
give you my
sure a
two
couple
cents
other people,
because
our candidates would like, what? I'm sure a couple
I
other
said I'm going to
people
give
would
you
like,
my 2 cents to the answer to that. Yeah, the candidates can talk in a minute, but I'm going to answer that question, Lori. Okay, about Douglas County. There is no requirement for us to speak at a public meeting. It is not a right to talk. It is a right to listen and observe. There was conflict with some of the community rights folks that John was part of, and the kinds of questions they were being asked at county commission meetings that they did not want to be disrupting the process of their meeting, and they shut them down. What we can do about it is get a lot of people demanding they come back open. And I'll tell you, I used it many times when we had that meeting to bring to the attention the county commissioners an issue that happened in the community, and so did many other people. So not through a channel, but in that public arena where actually, if you want some change, it's better to have it in that public meeting brought up than it is to meet behind closed doors with your county commissioners. That's my experience of Douglas County. But legally, there's not much you can do about it. That's a political solution, is to demand that they start letting us have the general, because every other entity I'm aware of, public entity in Douglas County, allows that general comment section, not just on agenda items. But I'm going to tell you, they don't even have to allow us to speak on their agenda items unless it's a legally required hearing. Okay.
okay.
So again, do not misunderstand. And this is true of most public meetings laws. They're not public dialogue. They're observation. So anybody else in the room is that who you were asking about, Lori, if they want to speak?
No, I was going to say that looping around with Mr. Miller, that if about the processes, I'm sure that the other candidates might like to join as well around with his experience and talking about processes and all of that, the administrative level. I surely would appreciate that. And thank you for offering that.
Barbara.
Well, yeah, I just like to comment, excuse me, that meeting that I read about that Barb sent the article about is it kind of blew me away because you had a judge, the DA, and the sheriff basically kind of at odds with the other two commissioners, and only having a chance to speak at the very end. I mean, and then I heard that the HR guy was the one that told you that you had to work from home. Is that correct? I think if the HR guy here told one of the commissioners that they couldn't be in their office, that he wouldn't have a job anymore. So it's the whole. It's just like a world. It's like a whole different world that I was, that I was reading about, and it's like you mentioned that the commissioners are in lockstep, but it seems like in Douglas County, if they all have to be in lockstep, but if they want to keep their job. I never seen anybody allowed any wiggle room to to even question what the commissioners are doing. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure where to begin to unpack unpack that. I think as my situation unfolds, one of the fundamental questions we'll be looking at is, are elected officials even subject to the same personnel rules that our employees are subject to? I mean, I can only say to you that, when I received an email saying, hey, somebody's made a complaint about you, I want to be proactive, right? Honestly, it caught me very off guard. I thought, what the heck? I mean, did I do something I didn't know? Per the county's personnel rules, you are not to know who made the complaint against you to protect that person from retaliation. And so, I mean, I was just trying to be cooperative, if you will, right? Really wasn't sure what was going on. But from a governance perspective, if you think about it, and what is, leaves much to ponder, is that the county commission, again, delegates its authority to, say, the administrator. The commission delegates certain authority to the personnel director. So again, you really have to unpack each county to look at how much of their authority they've delegated to processes, if you will. And certainly you want protections from employees from, any kind of renegade, wild elected officials. But I mean, I think the point you bring up and the point that's been brought to me many times is, other commissioners just look at me and they just don't know how it's possible. What is going on, to kind of riff off of your point. We would never see anything like this. So, yeah, I mean, it's been interesting for me. And, I question some days, I question, should I have even taken that direction? Right.
Barbara and then Chris, they have their hands up.
Casey, I've been coming to intermittently to Board of Commissioner meetings since May, and I've posed the same question at almost every meeting, which is I ask the commissioners, of course, the public meeting laws allows them to not respond when people pose a question during the public comment period. I've asked the same question over and over. What's the legal basis for barring you from your office, even though the investigation, the outside investigation, which incidentally cost the county upwards of $60,000, what's the legal basis for keeping you out of your office? And I have yet to receive any quote of any legal statute that justifies keeping you out of your office. Have you been offered any law at all that justifies them keeping you out of your office?
No, I mean, certainly no Oregon statutes. I think the ongoing premise here is that I'm following through with a county personnel policy cooperation. But yeah, no, certainly no firm statute has ever been provided to me. Oh, um, oh, never mind, never mind. I'm here.
Chris had a question.
Hi, good evening. It's Christine Hutchins. Um, I've been following this whole thing with Casey, and how I met Barbara Davis for the first time was at the 6-4 meeting in June. And I was very, very surprised by Council Yule's comments to us, and we've been trying to get that through to the commissioners ever since. And the only commissioner that's ever responded to me is Casey Miller. And so I am in the process of recalling Commissioner Claire Hall currently. We've got our signatures in and we're waiting for certification. I believe she needs to be removed. I believe she's doing an awful lot of things that she shouldn't be doing. And one of them, of course, is not giving equity to all commissioners. I mean, Casey was elected with 13,840 odd votes. So basically, you know, the voters of Lincoln County have been negated. So I just wanted to share that. And I do have to say, I'm just absolutely amazed at the level of control that Casey's had. Fortunately for them, I'm not the commissioner, because I wouldn't have had the level of control you have. And I think it's important that people get to hear your story, because there's so many people out there. I mean, I talk to people daily that call me through, you know, Messenger and through texting, that they don't understand. They don't understand why you're not able to get something on the agenda. They don't realize that you've been trying every single meeting, and that you have approximately 38, I think we're up to now, items that you've requested to be added to the agenda and never got on the agenda. And that's my question.
Well, yeah, and thank you, Chris. And I would say, to add to that, the dialogue within the meeting, itself. I'll ask to speak on an issue. I'll ask to speak to somebody who's coming in and providing public comments. And per our rules, I have to receive that affirmation from the chair, and I'm not allowed to speak to top it off. Now, as chair, and I was chair for my first year, would I ever, prohibit my fellow commissioner from speaking? No way, right? So, and then I want to circle back to, the item of public comment. Several months ago, Commissioner Hall stated that she was going to propose that we reduce public comment to agenda items only, and I really opposed that. And thankfully, many members of the community came out and said, no, we don't want that. So, I think it's important that we have community input, period. Yeah, it is my understanding that the board doesn't have to provide it, which I think to me is crazy. It really should be a place where we can come and have the conversations that we need to have. Yeah, I mean, certainly in my history of filming probably over 700 county commissioner meetings, especially when I was the public information officer. Yeah, I've seen the community come in and potentially be, maybe very off base about what they think the commission is responsible for. But I think, as an element of customer service and a commitment to diplomacy and uplifting everybody, we should find ways to really engage everyone and put things into context to provide that customer service to the community. So I just wanted to ask, is Douglas not have public input at all?
They do on agenda items only. The agenda
Oh,
they set. They used to have a general 30-minute set, and I mean for years. These commissioners who changed that over a conflict with the public showing up
mm,
to demand answers. And I would say the city of Roseburg, I'm not always a fan, and I'm a citizen of the city of Roseburg as well as the county. They do very good on their agenda, although there is this squabble among even the chair, the council president being able to be part of getting agenda items on, all going through the mayor. The solution is your charter, just like the solution to our problems in Douglas County, besides different people on the commission, is the charter. Because
mm,
some of those processes they're probably relying upon. It's like the city charter here. And I've had this dialogue with a city councilor here that I know, who is the council president, who had to, fight to be able to put agenda as the president of the city council, that there are those changes that probably need to be made. And the one thing that, somebody asked, do they have to respond to your comments? They do not.
yeah,
It is not a public dialogue. But I got to tell you, prior county commissioners, even Doug Robertson, king of the timber, advocates, he would even dialogue with people during a county commission meeting if they brought something up to try to address a problem. I think he had far less problems of accusations against him, which is, I think, what pissed off our county commissioners, why they took that draconian approach. But it was their lack of transparency that made people assume, well, what the heck are you doing behind closed doors with our dollars? The park is being, logged. We don't remember ever seeing any of that stuff. So I think it for all of us, I mean, you just raise a whole lot of reason that we tried a charter amendment. There needs to be more commissioners. That deliberation when there's three county commissioners or three on a body is a state law fix, right? Because if they're going to fix that. But the other way I think you raised is the ability to clearly separate administrative duties, which can be done as a function without the public, input or even in view, and that legislative. And that's, I think, why the folks who advocated the charter change here that failed miserably, not surprisingly, but they advocated for 5 county commissioners unpaid. We have full-time paid county commissioners right now. And so, they make more than the governor of the state of Oregon, just FYI. and and a full-time administrator. And although we can have problems with administrators who are control freaks, they at least are usually professionally trained on how to be public administrators, right?
yeah.
And that is a real selling point, because when sometimes elected officials shouldn't be administrators. And I think you have some maybe in your county, and that's my opinion of what we have in our county right now.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think when Barbara and Chris came in, both on the same meeting, and I'm sitting there going, they're going, why is this guy, he's not in his office? And I'm going, thank you, right? Thankfully, somebody's asking. But what I see happening here, and maybe it's a tidal shift, is that we need to fix these things. The community needs to have voice. And, maybe when things are going fine, okay, we're all right. But it's really when we have a lot of contention and things go sideways, we need these safeguards to ensure that the community does have a voice. And I think we're just going through that tidal shift. I mean, I've had some people say to me, well, you pulled the Band-Aid off something people always felt in regard to, shoot, I forgot your name there. It says Community Rights, Douglas County. What was your name again, sir?
John.
John.
Yeah.
I think, John, what had happened in that meeting for me is I came in with a host of concerns, and one on my list was the same that the community had. And so what they observed in that meeting was really me sort of validating, oh shoot, this is how things have kind of happened behind the scenes and why we've been able to be excluded, right? It's because there aren't any clear rules, so we can kind of shift things around to our advantage, perhaps. And I think that was why that meeting was really powerful, and it certainly wasn't some sort of setup by me, but several things sort of converged and people can kind of see, wow, yeah, we need better process and procedure. In my mind, I envision future board rules that empower all elected officials to at least request agenda items and have an intermediary public mechanism to say, hey, your DA was elected by the community. She's the subject matter expert in her area. Sure, the commission has control over the DA's budget or the sheriff's budget, but they're elected separately. And we need to ensure that they can provide the voice of the constituents that chose them. So we just need some modernization, I think, to ensure the democratic process really flows.
Casey, can I ask? You referred to commission responsiveness and allowing public comments as a kind of customer service. Why would
Yeah.
you call it customer service?
Oh, well, I mean, I think, it's your government. When I was a public information officer and people would call the office and I would essentially mitigate a lot of times calls, concerns. Many by the time they reach the commissioner's office, people might be pissed. They're upset. And they want some answers, right? Maybe they haven't been getting the service they want from a particular department. And so I would listen to those calls over the years and try to, ascertain, is it within the jurisdiction of Lincoln County? Sometimes people call and they're upset and it's not even us, it's the city, for example. But for me, as the public information officer, it wasn't just that I should ascertain if it was the responsibility of Lincoln County. If it wasn't, I felt like, okay, who's supposed to take care of that? Oh, it's the city of Lincoln City. And then I felt like, well, here's the city manager's phone number, or here's the department that you should, inquire to. And I just felt like people were so grateful to have a human being answer their questions, but then additionally that we would take the time to hand them off with good guidance about where their problem can be resolved. And it just felt so good over the years to have people feel good and have a sense of restored confidence that government wasn't there just to take advantage of them, but there was there to really problem solve. So when I say that to you, I mean, I just think as a commissioner, I feel like that's my responsibility. It's not just whether or not the county can solve the problem and hey, I'm done with the conversation. How can I further help them you know, um, have a better day. Shit. And it just seems to me like why shouldn't government have the same attitude, diplomacy, and pride in customer service that we would expect from any other organization where we would say, hey, I talked to a human being and they really care. You know?
Well, but my question is really more about the term you're using there, a customer. Is a citizen a customer? Why consider them a kind of customer?
I mean, I really see government as is the citizens, asset. It's a shared asset. Your tax dollars go, and to that end, I think that's what people want. I think they pay into this resource, and the resource should be there to serve the community. I mean, I work for the citizens. I mean, they're the ones that filled in the little circle that chose me to be the conduit for them.
Well, do your colleagues work for the citizens? If, as another person in this call mentioned, they are effectively rejecting the votes of many
No,
people in the county?
no, and I think that's why people are really frustrated right now. When you're not getting phone calls, when you're not getting honest answers, when obviously, I feel like a phrase that's I'm hearing commonly coming from our office is, I can't talk about it. Well, you can at least tell me why you can't talk about it. That would be at least somewhat satisfactory. And I think people, people aren't dumb, right? Like they know when you're putting them on. So if you can't talk about it, tell them why you can't talk about it. Don't treat people to be, empower people, and people know when they're getting shined on.
Mhm. So what actually makes an elected official beholden to the people who vote for them, especially if you're
Mm.
considering them to be customers?
Yeah, I mean, I know as a paid elected official, I feel compelled to, provide a return on investment to the community. But I guess it's we all have a stake in the game. Me too. I mean, I'm a citizen too, right? Like, so I want it to work well. I can see when things are bottlenecked up. It just makes really sense to me when I talk to people, and there's that atrophy for problem solving. I'll give you an example. My wife's parents were needing to sell a property that they had. She was in Lane County. They lived in this section of Crow they called Bloom Hill, and generations of families had lived up there. And it was really important that they rehab this property, sell it for their own well-being, but also, to create another habitable piece of housing. But anyways, it took me, it took my wife, it took her brother and a former planner to really work with them to get through Lane's planning department to make that property suitable to be handed off, to a new owner. And I guess my thought about seeing all that happen is when I sense people come to us for challenges, say with the planning department, and the complaints can be varied, but to me, the attitude really should be to optimize assistance to the community so we can make sure there's another house that can be purchased. We need housing. And, in that sense, it starts right in our planning department. How are we helping people get from point A to point B? And I think that's about working together. And it's gonna come from subject matter experts and staff within the organization itself. But in many cases, it's going to come from also helping the community navigate the government itself for a win-win.
Well, with all due respect, I don't think you answered my question. What makes an elected official beholden to the people who vote for them? Because from what I'm getting from your answer is it's just a matter of attitude. If say a county commissioner just feels that they're going to listen to those who vote for them, uh,
Yeah,
seemingly arbitrarily, because
yeah,
they just personally feel that way or not.
maybe so. I mean, taking an oath of office might matter, I suppose. But I don't think customer service is defined in statute anywhere.
It may be the terminology without, usurping the conversation is I think that customers being looked at from a capitalist point of view is somewhat offensive if we think a most important role in our
Hmm,
existence is citizen,
sure.
right? So I think that, for me in what Zach brought up, that kind of triggers that vocabulary, but I get your point
Hmm,
that, the way that we are treated has a lot to do with our interactions with them as citizens, right? That
hmm,
and I also agree there should be no option. But the problem is in our society, isn't our option to solve that is to get rid of those people who are in office, right? I mean, isn't that ultimately what ends up happening? And Lori had a question, and I usurped that too. And I'll come back to you, Zach, if you want to follow up. Sorry, Lori, you want to ask a question or make a comment?
She's
You're
unmuted.
muted.
She's on mute.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller, you mentioned that the democratic process around the agenda and putting like the attorney, the other elected officials on being able to present on the agenda and review it. And I really like that idea, especially since there could be cracks in the system and people, you don't know what you don't know. And so sometimes being up there and talking through things, and you can kind of put the big picture together, big ideas together when other people are presenting. And so what is the process around that? What is holding up that? It's a great idea. I don't understand why it's not making sense to other people that it's a great idea.
Yeah, yeah, I don't either. I suppose it's just at this point, the chair and council feel empowered to make the call on their own, right? Of what's relevant. I mean, certainly there's logistical planning that's needed, right? You want to be sure that the right people are at the table for the conversation, and certainly I'll own that, there may be a timing element to it as well. Do we have the capacity to take and move forward an issue, right? But again, I think it's working through that together collectively to decide, why is it a priority or why isn't it a priority? Is this something we can dive into or not? I mean, I think again, we should be able to watch that unfolding to a certain degree, right?
Or even discovering that
Mhm.
something's happened that should be a priority that you
Yeah,
wouldn't have made space and time for in the first
yeah,
place.
yeah.
And is there a legislative way that you can move forward with trying to, um, or a legal way that you can move forward with trying to put something on the agenda?
I mean, there doesn't seem to be anything, at least in statute. I talked to the Oregon Government Ethics Commission executive director and said, is there any statute? Because I don't see it, but tell me, is there something there that gives me agency to request that the governing body meet? And she says, no, it's in the local rules of the jurisdiction itself. So we don't have administrative rules, we don't have statute, that says, you know, or mitigates for an elected official not being able to gather its governing body.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
maybe a gap.
and so how could somebody else, how does the chair get selected amongst you three then? When is it your turn to be the chair?
Yeah, historically, our process has been one of rotation. So each successive year, chair, vice chair, and it just sort of rolls through. So there's no code that dictates that, but really historical practice.
Hmm, interesting. Oh, and one other question. It
Mhm.
sounds like they're treating this like an human resource issues, like it's a personnel issue, but then also it's not a personnel issue, right? Am I here understanding that right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it certainly isn't something I've requested executive session, for example, to work through that nebulous idea, I guess, if it's nebulous. And yeah, no one has ever really drawn lines in the sand about um, what constitutes our elected officials and where they stand in relative to the personnel rules, for example.
And it's kind of interesting that you're having to abide by something like that, but then the chair delegated their administrative duties to the HR department person too. So there
Yeah.
sounds like there's some maybe interesting dynamics or ways like rules that, or like what Betsy suggested, some charters or something to get hashed out, especially since this already cost the county $60,000. So maybe looking at some consultation and legal remedies so this doesn't happen again. And then that way you guys are operating in effectively and with impact.
Yeah, no, I agree, Lori. What I see is further consultation, further analysis, legal and even operationally, for us to create better rules, better framework, right? That needs to happen.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry that's happening too.
The structure of Oregon government and sub-government under the state, is allows charters. Basically, that's the constitution of your city or your county, and everything has to flow from that. Whether an elected official is bound by any employment law is a big question in my mind, having paid close attention to this aspect of citizenry for decades. Try to chastise one of your peers when they're an elected peer. I'm not sure you have the right to do that. I'm not sure the body itself. Now, what would you do about it? You could go to your office and say, I'm going to work here. What could they do about it? Have you arrested? And then you would have your arena to fight it. I'm not suggesting you do any of that, but that is one scenario that one could actually challenge the legality of whether they had a right to bar you, because a trespass is not an absolute right. The trespass has to be when it's government property. And I have dealt with this issue that it has to be a legitimate right to trespass. You can't say, just because I don't like the way you behave, you can never come to this government office again. And I've intervened with people that has been done to by the state of Oregon. It is not proper. So I'm not sure you don't have legal leg to stand on, but that's a fight like any of them. It certainly would risk, some, calling their bluff. And what are they going to do? Have you arrested for trespass? That would be the logical conclusion if they wanted to push that. But anyway, my 5 cents. Do not take it as legal advice.
Yeah,
So
I like that suggestion too.
Anybody else comment? Zach, you want to chime in?
Well,
Yeah.
okay,
Zach.
something that's been brought up throughout this discussion is the notion of public comment. Casey mentioned that community needs to have a voice, that public should have feedback, and that the public should be able to dive into administrative management issues together. But Casey, you did also mention earlier on that that the public can often be relegated to public comment. And so considering that, even in Douglas County, we have the issue of public comment not even really being allowed in some circumstances, and public comment even at our city councils not necessarily amounting to very much. In looking to secure public comment, do you see that securing of public comment is an ultimate goal or a minimum that we should actually be striving beyond? Is there something beyond public comment alone that you would like to see implemented in a more democratic form of local governance?
Yeah. It was Zach, right? Thanks for that. Yeah, for example, in our jurisdiction, we just have public comment. We don't really have a lot of guidance around that. We have a form, for example, that individuals can fill out. They can provide it, on Zoom, they can come in person, or they can fill out the form. And I've thought before that the form, while I don't like the idea of restricting it to just wide open whatever. But if we could even on the form create maybe 150 word section for a brief summary, or is this in the jurisdiction of Lincoln County, or what is the subject? And then I've also contemplated, should we create a form like a request for information, a request for assistance? And what I'm getting at is how can we, take or help the community member, narrow down what they're trying to do. So when we receive that information, should it be sent to the planning department? Can it be solved right here in the public meeting? Is it a larger, more nebulous question that is going to take some time to work through with the person to really find out if it's within the service profile of county government? So, I think the stewardship we have to being a problem solver is what I'd like to see us step up our game on. I'm not sure what it looks like yet, but I know I have a sense of commitment to do that. How it's engineered, I'm not sure yet. Does that help at all?
Maybe. Do you think that citizens of Lincoln County should be participating in the decision making in the affairs of their county rather than just the commissioners?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I do think so. How we manage that, because it can be, uh, I mean, look at how many different potential viewpoints there are, right? I mean, I feel like every time I talk to a constituent, I've got a variation. Um, how do we sort of manage that into something that's, we're able to wrangle it in such a manner? I'm not sure I have the problem completely solved yet, but I do think that, yeah, I think that I want the wisdom of the community. I don't want to go it alone, but I will also say that, that can be a pretty tough thing to do because, of the variety of perspectives. I guess it just depends on, any given citizen on a particular issue and how much they know and understand. So I think there's kind of an education thing there too. I see it kind of circular, but I also agree that, when we go into deliberation, sometimes it depends on how far we are on a given subject that, whether or not at that point that the public is hitting their mark too, to be substantive of where the issue is, it's tough.
I think that in my observation, the part of the problem is most people don't give a shit about what their government's doing until they have a problem,
Mm,
right? Or till they notice something that triggers, like here for some people, it was cutting down the trees in our parks. Okay. Now, all the people scrambled and thought, well, they're not giving me proper notice. And somebody came to me and I said, yeah, they are. They're giving you the notice that's required under Oregon law. And here is how you find out what that is. And so if it is something, what they have to do, even with a hearing, as you well know, there's legal procedures of notice of when that matter is going to be held. They have to have a hearing, it's set aside, it has to be recorded. There's protocol that does that. And I think that the problem is the fact that most of us really, even if we were trained originally in K through 12, which most people weren't in Oregon, is my assumption, um, about how government works, they don't really pay attention. None of us, and why bother? Right? Why should we bother with all that stuff? Because, we didn't sign up for that. But I think that then becomes a real roadblock
mm,
with, when people go in to ask questions. But then on the other side, I think this doing anything you want on your own without public oversight has gotten bureaucrats into a position that now they get a chip on their shoulder when you just start asking questions. Like, why do you want to know? Right. Well, because I want to know and I have a right to know. But so I think this is a long running problem, in government. I don't care at what level it is, and the bureaucracies themselves with administrators. The problem I think your county has is not enough personnel that are paid. It sounds like there's a practical, functional administrative ability. Our county is going to be heading that way real soon because of the money losses. And so these things are just going to be exacerbated, even if you come up with a perfect system, right? And probably what that red cape in front of a bull with me is when those bureaucrats start acting like I don't have a right to ask questions. And so I think that's kind of the trigger point. I think community rights really started when this roadblock was set up by the county commissioners, and then them getting a bit miffed that people had the nerve to insult their integrity. Right. So then the fight is not about why I wanted to come to county government. Now it's about all this other crazy stuff. Lori, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, and also to the point of, being educated on government, and even I remember some of that, but you forget, and then it is complicated, and then you become disempowered and disenfranchised when you are trying to do the civic engagement and become a part of it, and you get squashed and put aside and treated like you're not a part of it. So I really commend you for trying to see the citizens as an important part of it, even when they're reaching out. The other part of it is I had a quick question for my own understanding in government ethics and public records and meetings. If I'm going around and if I was a commissioner and I'm meeting with people in the community and I'm gathering information about public issues or their concerns and I'm putting it together, does that violate any of that kind of ethics or rules on public needing to be in public kind of stuff?
No, but I think one of the things I've heard, for example, about, where maybe serial meetings is getting into the weeds. I think, Lori, for example, if you're talking to me as a commissioner, and then you meet with the next commissioner and say, well, you know what Casey said, right? He's going to vote this way on the meeting coming up.
Yeah.
Could you inadvertently be causing a serial meeting by then going to each commissioner and saying, here's what Miller thinks? And I've kind of thought to myself, like, oh my gosh, like, should I be stating more than I should on Facebook for, right? Like, could we be triggering serial meetings in that manner? So, I mean, I think it's an interesting point.
Okay.
And keep in mind that most of these laws were really made before the internet, right? And
Yeah.
for widespread use of even email,
Yeah.
right? A lot of these original laws regarding public meetings to make it better than it was, the more access. But I don't think that they've kept up with the technology, of how the world operates. And that is something, we did have some reform of the public meetings and records law about 10 years ago. And actually, it was a case out of Lane County that brought up that serial meeting issue. And the courts actually determined that it was staffing, not about an individual citizen, but you raise a really interesting question. My argument would be that's probably not a violation. And your scenario, Lori, where you just go out and meet, if you don't convey to your fellow commissioners what that meeting was, you're probably safe. It's when because if we still only have 3 commissioners, 2 of you's a quorum, that mandates a public meeting. So
Okay.
that's the problem when we only have 3 county commissioners, and any communication they would have on anything that's potentially a decision being made by them as a body at any time, right? Reasonably foreseeable. So
Can you just like have make a meeting that, hey, we're going to have a discussion meeting over these things and make it public that I had these meetings in the public and this is what we all talked about?
yeah, I mean, if all of them agree to it, that's one of the things I was going to say, that the law is a minimum standard. So some of these things, absolutely, they could do. The city of Roseburg could do better. The county government could do better. They could go back to, when Doug Robertson would, answer questions, from the dais, but then there is always a problem with government, and that's lawyers. And although I've had many friends that are lawyers and I love lawyers, not all. And they do get into that potential liability. Like when commissioner was talking earlier about, do I say it on Facebook? That comes from that lawyer kind of paranoia. All right, don't take anything. Don't say anything.
Mm.
Yeah.
I had a quick question. It's a little bit different. It's kind of a subject that Lori was talking to me the other night. Is this your commissioner job? Is this the only job you have? Do you have a business on the side?
No,
No?
no,
Okay.
it's not.
Okay. How about the other two commissioners?
No, I don't believe so. No, I think they're, in it to win it.
Okay.
Are you
Lori and I
guys
had
paid full time? Are you guys paid full time like Douglas
Yes.
County commissioners?
Yeah, we
And
are Lincoln
you
County,
are?
yeah, full time, yeah.
Okay. And the other question I had is, do you guys have partisan primaries or do you have nonpartisan primaries?
Nonpartisan, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
somebody can win you have them in May. Is it the May and the general election in November? But somebody can win in May.
Yeah.
Does that happen
Yeah.
in
Yeah, it happened last go. Yeah, Jacobson won by over 51% against her opponent.
Yeah, our incumbents, Freeman and Chris Boyce actually won in the May primaries, that last two election. Tim Freeman was an appointee at the time. I mean, Tom Kress was an appointee
Yeah.
the first run. But they all last time won in the May primary.
Wow.
Lori, did you want to ask another question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me lower my hand. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, everybody, tonight, and especially Commissioner Miller. Thank you.
Yeah,
Hey.
Chris, and I want to say that what Chris actually is doing is the right thing. Even if you're not successful, the recall, I mean, that's ultimately the last straw that you have to do, but sometimes that's what you have to do, right? I don't know that we could pull off a recall here, so don't even think that I'm suggesting that for any of it.
I'm not sure we can pull it off here either. We're making every effort to, but we just had a recall in Walport that got kicked out. The county council, who is questionable here too, kicked the whole thing out. So of course we are concerned that she's going to involve herself in ours, and of course it's her boss that we're recalling. So you can see the bias conflict coming into play. But my comment really is just to say I'm not an official. I have no interest in ever being an official. But what I can say is that we do pay a lot of taxes in Oregon put against other states, and I think for Casey's approach of wanting the general public to be involved, I think is very commendable, because the reality is we are paying dearly for this. I pay a lot of property taxes. Yes, I built a house that's valued a little higher than maybe the mean. But to be excluded, I was fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to look at this. It did push the recall further out there for me, but I got banned for 6 months because I went to a meeting and said something they didn't want to hear. And so I went through that whole process, having to find a First Amendment attorney, which of course is not easy in Oregon. I did finally find one, so I was very fortunate to find him. And of course, I'm now back allowed to go to the BOC meetings because they violated my First Amendment rights, and they also violated the rule that they used to ban me. So, but it's this idea of shutting down public speech. And of course, the rules, as everybody has said, doesn't require it. But just because something isn't required doesn't mean it's not a good idea to do, right? So the fact that I find it very commendable that Commissioner Miller is willing to look at this, and we've actually had that conversation of, the perfect situation would be to have the meeting, because clearly they've got to get the business taken care of. They can't have a bunch of people constantly interrupting throughout the meeting. They've got to take care of business. But then afterwards, maybe for 30 minutes, let people come and say, hey, I've got a problem here. Who do I speak to? And Commissioner Miller's been very open to this, and I'm hoping that once all of this recall is complete and we've got another commissioner in place, that can actually move forward. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to clarify my comment, I wanted to say I'm not advocating for no public comment. I'm just explaining what the rules are. That fix is a state legislative fix. That's the fix. There's a fix, but it's not at the county committee. So it's the politics, right? So if they don't have to do it, then how are you going to get them to do it? Because they can do a whole lot more than they do. Right. So that's their decision to make. And so that becomes the political decision, right?
Right. And when one county takes it away, the other counties are coming going, well, it's working really well for Benton, or it's working really good for Marion. So why don't we try this? And that's the way it was actually presented at our meeting, wasn't it, Commissioner Miller? Claire Hall decided, well, I've done this in my housing consortium. She's the chair of the housing consortium, and she's already managed to shut them up. And so it was almost like she just felt she could roll over onto the BOC. And of course, she got a lot of pushback. Fortunately, people came out of their apathy and their busyness and their, other things are more important, and actually showed up and said, listen, we want to be heard. We feel that this is a government for the people, by the people. I mean, if we're going to, basically ignore the general public, why even have the meetings? Just do everything in private and get it done.
Yeah, what was interesting about that meeting too is, I was kind of framing it as, people are going to show up to say, well, no, they don't want to be relegated to just agenda items only. But clearly some people were coming in because they thought this might be the last chance to, have their complaint heard, which was like, whoa, okay, wait a second. Are we, how do we know at any given point in time that there are those out there that are lost, have never had their issues addressed, and now that would really limit that possibility, right? Where there's just that free form when you've been turned out maybe by a department head, and a commissioner doesn't necessarily know about it, because the commission office does kind of operate as that stopgap with with our open door policy anyways, that somebody can come to us if they aren't successful elsewhere.
Well, you might have an open door policy and the other two talk about it, but they don't actually have it. Because I've sent 4 letters, multiple phone calls, and never ever received a response. And I think we're 5 months now been waiting. So I can understand that they can't necessarily get back to you right away.
Yeah.
I mean, your problem is huge to you and it's minor to the commissioner, right? But 5 months, I think, is more than fair time. Thank you.
Fine.
And I think that you pointed out one area that Douglas County is worse. There are some of us that at least one of our county commissioners won't talk to. So he has a whole list of people he won't talk to by now. I am honored to be one of the first people, I think, early on in his career. So
yeah, I guess
which is all well and good for me. I'm not even going to legally challenge that concept, because my life is better. Nick, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I got a question. Is there no bylaws or rules of procedure via Robert's Rules of Order or anything that you can use to make changes to meetings to the rights of the general citizens versus the rights of what the commissioners can do, law or rules they can uphold for their meetings and stuff like that? Or are you bound by the organizational rules and stuff that are set by the state?
No, Zach, I'm not sure. I know I'll be definitely exploring this. But yeah, we have nothing. We don't have any policy one way or the other, but it's something I'm really going to be working on.
Yeah,
That's a very, and thanks, Nick. That's a very good point to raise because actually some of them actually do default to either Robert's rules or Mason's rules of order, like the state
Oh,
legislature
oh,
defaults to.
Masons. Huh.
Yes, I
Never heard.
believe that's what last I was aware they were doing the Masons rules of
yeah, because
order.
if they use Robert's rules, everyone any subject or not subject, any topic that's debatable, any anyone is allowed 2.5 minutes to talk twice per topic there,
Oh,
unless your bylaws say otherwise.
hmm.
So if you don't have bylaws, set them up using Robert's rules, and then make sure that that is because you can't take away people's rights in when using Robert's Rules of Order, especially to debate and things like that without a vote, and that requires
Hmm.
2/3 of your uh,
Hmm.
board to
Okay.
adjust that. So I mean, it's really worth looking into. I don't remember if Douglas County uses one like that or anything like that, but it really doesn't make sense for boards not to. It's just kind of just shows that maybe they don't know what they're doing because
Hmm.
it's there to protect them, to protect people and everything. So it would be worth it looking into, and I'm definitely going to look to it for here in Douglas County because
Yeah.
if we don't have bylaws or anything like that for meetings, that's a wasted opportunity to give the people a lot of power.
Okay. Yeah. Helpful. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments? Last parting comments from Commissioner Miller? Anything
Uh,
else on the subject?
no, I mean, thank you for having me. It's a good for me to, be challenged, be able to tell my story, and think through it, right? A lot has gone on, and there's a lot of services county governments provide, and many facets. So having a cooperative community to really, in good faith, try to work together and make it better is helpful. And I guess I feel so naive for thinking in a way that every commissioner returned phone calls. I just thought that's what you were supposed to do. And I can't imagine trying to get away with not doing that. But thanks for your time, everyone. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Very
you.
interesting discussion. Um, so like I mentioned before we started, I'm gonna stop the live stream and